I've known Dan Coats for more than 20 years. And throughout his life, Dan Coats has been characterized by service to our state and our nation. And I've known Dan and Marsha Coats as personal friends for many years. To know Dan and Marsha is to know people of deep faith, with a servant's heart. Their desire to live out servant leadership each and every day has been evident in everything they've done. I think I can speak for all Hoosiers when I can say how grateful we are for his steady commitment and his example to do what's right for our state and our people.
Abe Lincoln said it was easier to talk for 3 hours than to compress your thoughts into 3 minutes, and saying just a few things about Dan Coats is hard. I guess I'll just sum up the depth of my admiration and feeling for this great public servant in 2 words, which are character and patriotism.
Dan Coats, first and foremost, is a family man. He's a man of faith. He's a man that puts his country first.
What's unique about Dan Coats is in a body that has a lot of big egos and sharp elbows. When he has something to say, everybody listens.
Over the years, young people who aspire to run for public office have come to me and visited and wanted to know, what they should do, how they should get started, what it's like to serve in public office, in state office. And in those conversations, from time to time, they've said, who is it that you have known that you really look up to? And I've said without hesitation, I've said this a number of times over the years, my model for a public servant is Senator Dan Coats.
He didn't care about Republican or Democratic. It wasn't that. It was what was best for the country, and I always believed that's what he wanted.
Well, I don't think I could have gotten through the confirmation process for the Supreme Court without the help of Senator Coats. He was between his 2 terms in the Senate when this happened. We had this routine. We would meet in the White House, maybe around 8 o'clock, and we would go over what had happened the day before, including all the things that were not so good that had happened the day before, and he was always encouraging. And then he and I and someone from the Legislative Affairs Office in the White House would take a government car to one of the entrances to one of the Senate buildings. And then as soon as we got out of the car, we were mobbed by photographers, still photographers, video photographers who followed us around throughout the day whenever we were in the hallway or any other public spot in the Capitol complex, taking thousands of pictures. And so the senator was with me through all of that. He went into all of the interviews with the senators.
The German people were great to be with. It was a hard time when we went over there. Just 4 days later, 9/11, and the outpouring of sympathy. It made me fall in love with Germany and the people there. That was a great, great honor, and we will always be grateful to George W. Bush for naming Dan as ambassador.
Senator Coats' entire public service career was characterized by courage and principle, but maybe never more so than in his decision in 2010 to run for office in what people thought would be an uphill, maybe even a futile quest. To the benefit of the state, in my opinion, it worked out very, very well.
We weren't sure we could beat Evan Bayh, but Dan was willing to take him on. And as soon as Evan Bayh saw he was going to have to beat Dan Coats, he decided to retire. That's the best evidence of what a strong candidate Dan Coats was going to be.
In all the instructions they had given us in the State Department for how to handle a catastrophe or a crisis in a country, they gave all kinds of different scenarios, but nothing like this. Dan wasn't prepared. He hadn't even been sworn in as the ambassador to Germany yet. And the president of Germany immediately called and said, come over, bring your wife, and we're going to swear you in a very non-formal, non-traditional ceremony, because we need to have an American ambassador here at this critical time. 2 days later, that evening, they had many invitations to come and do this and do that, and Dan said, well, you go to this one and I'll go to this one. And I ended up going to the one that probably Dan should have gone to. It was in the Symphony Hall in Berlin, and it was a memorial concert. And the Berlin Philharmonic played. They had the president, the chancellor, and all the top officials from Germany. It brought tears to everyone's eyes. I'll always remember that.
Dan Coats is a principled conservative who is guided by his faith, not wearing it on his sleeve, but exhibiting it in the right way. I've cited the fact that Dan is someone who has never exhibited arrogance or hubris in public service.
Having a former member of the Senate as my guide was very valuable because he knew the ways of the Senate, and he knew many of the senators, most of the senators, I think, with whom I met. And he, usually let me do all the talking, but every once in a while he came to my rescue and intervened in some interesting situations. He would repeat it many, many times to keep me going in the right direction. He would say, remember this, 3 months life tenure. 3 months life tenure. He must have said that dozens and dozens of times over the course of that period to keep, to remind me that although this was very unpleasant at times, it would come to an end. It was a tremendous commitment of time on his part, and a tremendous commitment of energy and his wisdom in dealing with the Senate, and kept me going and helped me get through all of this.
He probably will never know the degree to which he has influenced other people who have been in office, me included. I watched how he worked with the staff. I watched how he selected his staff. I watched Dan in the early days of his service in the Senate and the way in which he trained people, the way in which he led people. I've never told him this, but it was something that I tried to emulate in my own office, in the Secretary of State's office.
He had many very valuable comments about how I should answer the questions, because my tendency as somebody who had been a Court of Appeals judge for 15 years was sometimes to give rather technical, very technical, lawyerly answers, and he would helpfully remind me that it would be better if I could explain things in a way that would be more accessible to a broader audience.
Our paths have crossed from time to time. I have not had constant contact with Dan Coats, but I've always felt kind of a kindred spirit and relationship with him. We enjoy one another's company. We enjoy those things that we have in common. And so as he closes this chapter of public service, and there may be a new chapter opening for him, I don't know all about that. He leaves with a record of personal professional accomplishment that I think is equaled by very few people in public life that I've ever known.
He was really very good to my family during the hearings. He sat next to my son, who at the time was in college, and they had long discussions. I later learned from my son. I wasn't paying attention to this while the hearings were going on, but they had long conversations about all sorts of things, politics and government. And I think not coincidentally, perhaps, my son is now working in the Senate, so I think that may have been an inspiration for the direction that his career has taken.
In 1999, I chaired the Indiana Billy Graham Crusade. It was the third time that Dr. Graham had come to Indiana over a long period of years. We had a 4-night crusade in June of '99. They asked that Dan Coats be one of the people on one of those 4 nights to stand up and give his testimony. I have very high regard for the Graham organization, the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, and all the people that work in it. They do things right, and for them to seek Dan out and to invite Dan to give his testimony in a nationally televised context really says a lot about his stature, about how people regard him.
I think he's universally respected, and I could see that in the meetings with the senators. There were Republicans, there were Democrats, there were conservatives, there were liberals. I could just tell from his conversations with them and the way we were received that they had great respect for him, because I think he is a real statesman. His service in the Senate, his service as an ambassador to Germany, which was something we had a chance to talk about quite a bit during the downtime during these meetings. And he's the kind of public servant that our country really needs.
Everybody that I knew, and when I was growing up, pretty much lied and cheated and stole. It was, well, obviously with the exception of my mother. And so that's basically what I was doing. And when I went to Dan's house and I saw how he interacted with his kids and the way his kids behaved, I became very aware that, you know, my way of life was not the correct way of life. And it was pretty amazing. I didn't understand at first, and I didn't cooperate at first. I got caught stealing. My mother made me call Dan and tell him that I had stolen, and it was the hardest phone call I'd ever made in my life. He said he was disappointed, but he loved me, and he forgave me. And nobody had ever said that to me before.
Jason was the little brother that Dan really has kept in touch with over all these years. And Jason, little blonde boy with blue eyes, and came from a family of other brothers. Dan and Jason just hit it off great, and they loved to do things together. Dan would usually bring him home, and I would try to have something that he liked to eat.
I remember I went home that night and I told my mother that Marsha had given me a hug and that she was just such a nice lady. Those were the words that I used to my mom. She's such a nice lady. My mother was a hardworking woman and was always stressed. And I realized that I was part of the stress. And I got that from Laura and Lisa when I was at their house. Andrew hadn't been born yet. Laura and Lisa, you know, if I wanted to get a little raucous, Laura would say, no, we can't do that. You know, because I don't know what I wanted to do, throw a ball indoors or whatever it might have been. But it made me understand that, you know, Laura wanted to please Marsha, and Marsha rewarded that behavior and rewarded my behavior. They always included me in on everything. I felt like I was a part of their family always. I still do today. When I talked to Marsha earlier today on the phone, you know, when I talk to her, I get a big smile on my face because she has a smile in her voice every time I've ever spoken to her. There's just a smile there, and it feels like love. It's just a great gift. I mean, Dan and Marsha belong together. They're wonderful people who have found each other. I can honestly say that I believe I would have been incarcerated based off the path that I was on were it not for Dan and Marsha. So the gift that they've given me is a gift of success. It's a gift of love. If I've given them love back, that would be good. I don't know what I've given them, but I love them with all my heart.
Dan is, from the first time I met him, I was very impressed. He was serious. We could talk and talk about everything. I thought he seemed more mature than a lot of the other boys I dated back then in college. We had common interests. We both loved sports, and we loved the Cubs. And now they've finally come to life. I knew he was a Christian, and that faith and the common bond we had that way was probably the strongest thing in our marriage over the years. That really is the glue that keeps you together. But I'm very grateful to the Lord and to Dan for the wonderful life we've had. We hope that Dan's service in the House and the Senate and in Germany, and then again in the Senate, that he's tried to make the right votes that he thought were best for Indiana and best for our country, conservative votes, trying to keep our country on the same path as the Founding Fathers envisioned. And that has been harder and harder as the years have gone by. But I think he's done the best job he could.
When enough votes came in for me to be confirmed, it was just a moment that I will always remember. And so I shook hands with the president and with Senator Coats. I think those were the first two, and that really changed my life. And then right after that point, I was brought up here because it was in the middle of a session, and there were things I had to vote on that very day. So it was that was the end of the whole confirmation process. I will always feel very close and very indebted to the people who helped me then, and right at the top of that list is Senator Coats.
He and Marsha have been not only longtime friends, but they're in it for the right reason. One of the things that really made him different than perhaps a lot of people, he had a very uncanny ability to listen. He was a very good listener, and he would listen, he'd look you right in the eyes, and you were the only person he was interested in. First and foremost, Dan Coats has been a long-time personal friend. Dan and Marsha, they're sort of like family to us. We've known them so long, we've watched their kids grow up, they watched our kids grow up. He and Marsha are dedicated individuals, people that love life, and they're very special to us, special to the Quayle family, and they're really part of our family.
Well, Dan and I met at Wheaton College, and the motto for Wheaton College is "For Christ and His Kingdom."
Dan and Marsha Coats have been steadfast advocates, particularly for the underserved community. In fact, it would be decades ago that Dan Coats helped introduce the whole idea of compassionate conservatism. He understood a long time ago that people in need don't just want a handout, they want a hand up.
Meeting all the people that we have met in Indiana, in Washington, and Germans too, and we still have many German people that we stay in touch with from our time there. So it's been a very fulfilling and exciting and adventurous life.
You know, the truth of the matter is he comes to the end of a long and storied career in public service. My heart's a little bit heavy. I hate to see Dan Coats go. He's been an inspiration to me in my career, and he's been a friend of Hoosiers every day of his public service. We need more leaders like Dan Coats, who live out every day what it means to be a public servant and a man of integrity. You know, Dan Coats told me one time, many years ago, that there's two kinds of people in public life. People that are called and people that are driven. Oh, for me and for my family, and on behalf of all the people of Indiana, I'm so grateful that Dan Coats was called to public service and answered the call with such selflessness and commitment. Dan Coats has been an inspiration to generations of Hoosier leaders, and he's been my friend. And I say with a grateful heart, on behalf of all the people of Indiana, thank you for your service to the state of Indiana and to the United States of America. Your leadership has made a difference, and your example will always inspire. God bless you, my friend.